Mighty God says, Adam and Eve, created by God in the beginning, were holy people. Which is to say, whilst in the Garden of Eden, they were holy, untainted with filth. They were also faithful to Jehovah, and knew nothing of the betrayal of Jehovah. This is because they were without the disturbance of the influence of Satan, were without Satan's poison, and were the purest of all mankind. They lived in the Garden of Eden, undefiled by any filth, unpossessed by the flesh, and in reverence of Jehovah. Later, when they were tempted by Satan, they had the poison of the serpent and the desire to betray Jehovah, and they lived under the influence of Satan. His thoughts were filled with evil and filth, without good or holiness. Is this not Satan? Mankind has developed through tens of thousands of years of history to get to where they are today. However, the mankind of my original creation has long ago sunk into degeneracy. They have already ceased to be what I want, and thus humanity, as they appear in my eyes, no longer deserves the name of mankind. They are rather the scum of mankind that Satan has taken captive. The rotten walking corpses that Satan lives in, and in which it is clothed. People do not in the least believe in my existence, nor do they welcome my coming. Satan corrupts people through the education and influence of the national governments and the famous and great. Their lies and nonsense have become man's life and nature. Everyone for himself and the devil take the hindmost is a well-known satanic saying that has been instilled into everyone and become the human life. There are some other words of life philosophy that are also like this. Satan educates people through each nation's fine traditional culture and causes humanity to fall into and be engulfed in an expansive abyss of destruction. And in the end, people are destroyed by God because they serve Satan and resist God.
We should read another part. For many years, the thoughts that people have relied upon for their survival have been corroding their hearts, to the point that they have become treacherous, cowardly, and despicable. Not only do they lack willpower and resolve, but they have also become greedy, arrogant, and willful. They are utterly lacking any resolve that transcends the self. And even more, they don't have a bit of courage to shake off the strictures of these dark influences. People's thoughts and lives are rotten. Their perspectives on believing in God are still unbearably ugly. And even when people speak of their perspectives on belief in God, it is simply unbearable to hear. People are all cowardly, incompetent, despicable, as well as fragile. They do not feel disgust for the forces of darkness, and they do not feel love for the light and the truth. Instead, they do their utmost to expel them. From when man first had social sciences, the mind of man was occupied by science and knowledge. Then science and knowledge became tools for the ruling of mankind, and there was no longer sufficient room for man to worship God, and no more favorable conditions for the worship of God. The position of God sunk ever lower in the heart of man. A world in man's heart with no place for God is dark, empty, without hope. And so arose many social scientists, historians, and politicians to express theories of social science, the theory of human evolution, and other theories that contravene the truth that God created man to fill the heart and mind of man. And in this way, those who believe that God created everything become ever fewer, and those who believe in the theory of evolution become ever greater in number. More and more people treat records of the work of God and His words during the Old Testament age as myths and legends. In their hearts, people become indifferent to the dignity and greatness of God, to the tenet that God exists and holds dominion over all things. The survival of mankind and the fate of countries and nations are no longer important to them. Man lives in a hollow world only concerned with eating, drinking, and the pursuit of pleasure. Wenya, why don't you read next?
Sure. Man walked through the ages with God, yet man knows not that God rules the fate of all things and living beings, or how God orchestrates and directs all things. This is something that has eluded man since time immemorial to the present day. As for the reason why, it is not because the ways of God are too elusive, or because the plan of God has yet to be realized, but because the heart and spirit of man are too distant from God. Therefore, even as man follows God, he unknowingly remains in the service of Satan. None actively seek out the footsteps or appearance of God, and none wish to exist in the care and keeping of God. Rather, they are willing to rely on the corrosion of Satan and the evil one in order to adapt to this world and to the rules of life the wicked mankind follows. At this point, the heart and spirit of man are sacrificed to Satan and become its sustenance. Moreover, the human heart and spirit become a place in which Satan can reside and a fitting playground for it. In this way, man unknowingly loses his understanding of the principles of being human and of the worth and purpose of human existence. The laws from God and the covenant between God and man gradually fade away in man's heart, and man no longer seeks or pays heed to God. As time passes, man no longer understands why God created man, nor does he understand the words that come from the mouth of God, or realize all that is from God. Man begins to resist the laws and decrees from God. The heart and spirit of man become deadened. God loses the man of his original creation, and man loses the root of his beginning. This is the sorrow of this mankind.
From the moment you come crying into this world, you begin to perform your duty. You assume your role in the plan of God and in the ordination of God. You begin the journey of life. Whatever your background, and whatever the journey ahead of you, none can escape the orchestration and arrangement that heaven has in store, and none are in control of their destiny. For only He who rules over all things is capable of such work. Since the day man came into existence, God has been steady in His work, managing this universe, and directing the change and movement of all things. Like all things, man quietly and unknowingly receives the nourishment of the sweetness and rain and dew from God. Like all things, man unknowingly lives under the orchestration of God's hand. Wenya?
Mankind, who left the supply of life from the Almighty, does not know why they exist, and yet fears death. There is no support, no help, but mankind is still reluctant to close their eyes. Braving it all drags out an ignoble existence in this world in bodies without the consciousness of souls. You live like such with no hope. He exists like such with no aim. There is only the Holy One in the legend, who will come to save those who moan in suffering and long desperately for his arrival. This belief cannot be realized so far in the people who are unconscious. However, the people still yearn for it so. The Almighty has mercy on these people who suffer deeply. At the same time, He is fed up with these people who have no consciousness, because He has to wait too long for the answer from humans. He desires to seek your heart and your spirit. He wants to bring you food and water and to awaken you, so you're no longer thirsty, no longer hungry. When you're weary, and when you begin to feel the desolation of this world, do not be perplexed, do not cry. Almighty God, the Watcher, will embrace your arrival any time. He is watching by your side, waiting for you to turn back. He's waiting for the day your memory suddenly recovers, becoming conscious of the fact that you came from God. You further realize that the Almighty has been watching there, awaiting your return all along. He longs bitterly, waiting for a response without an answer. His watching is priceless and is for the heart and the spirit of humans. Perhaps this watching is indefinite, and perhaps this watching is at its end. But you should know exactly where your heart and spirit are now.
Wenya, having read
You shoulder your commission and your responsibility. Where is your historic sense of mission? Is your task a heavy one? They are poor, pitiable, blind, and at a loss, wailing in the darkness. Where is the way? How they yearn for the light, like a shooting star, to suddenly descend and disperse the force of darkness that has oppressed men for so many years. Who can know just how anxiously they hope and how they pine day and night for this? These men who suffer deeply remain imprisoned in the dungeons of darkness without hope of release, even on the day that the light flashes. When will they weep no longer? These fragile spirits who have never been granted rest are truly suffering such misfortune. They have long been sealed off by the ruthless ropes and the history that is frozen in place. Who has ever heard the sound of their wailing? Who has ever seen their miserable visage? Have you ever thought how grieved and anxious God's heart is? How can He bear to see the innocent mankind He created with His own hands suffering such torment? Have you forgotten that you are one of the victims? Out of your love for God, are you not willing to strive to save those who have survived? Are you not willing to use all your effort to repay the God who loves mankind like His own flesh and blood?